That's Stacey Blackwood. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel with us coming at you with the strength and conditioning show. Stacey, it's been a while, but it's time to talk Iron Bowl. Obviously, last week against Oklahoma. If you want to, we can go back and spend some time talking about that, but I really feel like everybody's ready to just look forward. We can discuss how last week is relevant to this week, though. Just with how they're playing, the fact that Jalen Milroe struggled, the offensive line, particularly the right side. Really, it was both tackles, but I would say Elijah Pritchett struggled a lot more than even Caden Proctor. Defense, and the fact that Oklahoma worked in some of those elements that Vanderbilt had as far as the shovel pass, some of the triple option stuff. Quarterback run was a huge part of their offense. Alabama could never really stop it for a majority of the game. They went for 250 plus yards. Sort of, if you want to, you can touch on like what all that means as far as applying it to Auburn and what Auburn likes to do or can do. But really, what are your thoughts on the Iron Bowl with it coming up in, I guess, just over 24 hours?
Yeah, well, to me, the Alabama run defense in this game is going to be critical because we know that Auburn can be explosive in the passing game with Cam Coleman and their talented wide receiver group. But to me, the Auburn offense starts with Jarquez Hunter. And the way Alabama played run defense last week, that has me concerned a little bit, especially because Peyton Thorne does have the ability to keep the football and run. He is athletic enough to make some plays in the running game as well. So to me, the story of the game tomorrow is going to be Alabama's ability to limit what Auburn does on the ground, because Auburn is going to take some shots. They're probably going to make a couple plays, but on a drive in and drive out basis, the Alabama run defense has to step up, and it can't be a repeat performance of what happened last weekend in Norman.
Yeah, it really can't. Alabama's chances at the college football playoff, they're slim. I understand that that there are some outs. There are plenty of teams that could lose. Alabama would probably need at least two if I had to guess, but there's multiple. Definitely 5+. Maybe you can start getting into 6, 7, 8 different possibilities, different combinations that could end up happening. But you got to get yourself right first. And one thing I'll say about Alabama's defense against Auburn's offense is this is another opportunity to kind of right the ship. By this point, it's almost too late in some ways, but the fact that you struggle like you did against Vanderbilt, you struggle like you did against Oklahoma. Auburn's another team who's fighting for bowl eligibility. They have some similarities as far as the personnel. They don't exactly, like Auburn's offense, it's very RPO driven, or it has been. It's actually interesting. It's been more, I would say it's been more of a traditionally ran offense in recent weeks. It's more of, taking the decisions out of Peyton Thorne's hands. It's not as much of that sort of thing. And really, it's either going to be a pass, it's going to be a run. And they've actually been more effective operating in that sense. But when you look at Hugh Freeze historically, very heavy RPO. That's what he wants to do, especially between the 20s. But I think that if you are them and you look at their personnel, the fact that Peyton Thorne has some mobility, he's more Jackson Arnold than he is like a Jalen Milroe or someone like that, but he's got more mobility than probably given credit for. You've got, one of, if not the best running backs in the SEC, one of the best running backs in college football, and Jarquez Hunter already gone for close to 1,200 yards rushing. And, you've got weapons in the passing game where you can actually do a lot more as far as the complementary stuff. You're probably looking at this game plan that Oklahoma put together for Alabama. You're looking at what Vanderbilt was able to do. You're looking at the fact that other teams have run some of this stuff as well. South Carolina kind of on the fly implemented some of it the very next week against Alabama's defense. You're probably looking at it and saying, hey, we should do some of this because they're really not getting it fixed. But from Alabama's perspective, this is another opportunity to right the ship and say, hey, it took us a while to get it figured out, but we did some things, we made some changes, some adjustments, and we did figure it out. I think that's you always want these types of opportunities, but at the same time, you've got to make the necessary adjustments.
Yeah, for sure. And that's Alabama fans are hoping to see that from Kane Womack in this defense, because last week in Norman, it didn't appear like any adjustments were made. I thought in the Vanderbilt game, it looked a little better defensively in the second half than it did the first half. But in Norman last week, I'm not sure it was any better in the second half. So Alabama fans are hoping that this defense can show some improvement, especially in the run defense, because if you allow teams to have that much success on the ground, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So the key to this game is Alabama's run defense, and hoping that Kane Womack and company can make adjustments in either the RPO style or the triple option, really more or less of what it is. But I am interested to see, like you mentioned, is Hugh Freeze going to allow Peyton Thorne to make those decisions, or are they going to be pre-made with the play call? So that part's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully, Coach Womack and company can kind of get some things figured out. I think it's there for this Alabama defense to be more successful against the run. I think they certainly have the players. I don't think it's a scheme issue. A lot of it's execution. A lot of it is, I mean, there was a play last week where it's 3rd and 1, and Alabama has 4 guys in the box, and that's it. And it's 3rd and 1. I mean, that's totally unacceptable, and it can't happen. So it's just little things, just over and over again. Whether you're not shedding blocks, whether you're not making plays in a one-on-one situation, getting the ball carrier down, those things can be corrected. But it's just going to see, can they correct it? Will they correct it? That's the question. And then to me, when you turn it on the other side, is what type of player are you going to get from Jalen Milroe this week? Because, and you mentioned the offensive line for sure. It's had its struggles. It struggled last week, especially against those speed type rushers. But Jalen Milroe, point blank period, has to be better. And it all seems like if Milroe starts slow, or some bad things kind of happen in the game to begin with, it seems like it's all downhill from there. So a quick start for Milroe is huge, and I'm ready to get to the game, because I don't think what we saw in Norman last week is what this team is. I think we started to see more of what this team is the previous weeks. I'm talking about against Missouri, against LSU. If you want to throw in Mercer as well, where they're running the football more consistently, and when they need to make plays in the passing game, they do. That was just not there at all this last week against Oklahoma. I don't think that's who Alabama is offensively. I think it's somewhere in between. I don't think they're what they were at LSU either. That was just kind of like what happened to Norman last week, an anomaly. But I just hope this team, you mentioned Auburn kind of having that motivational factor of not only playing for the upset, but trying to earn a bowl bid after the way the season started. Would they start 2-5 on the year? And here they are. They've kind of scratched their way back into it with a possibility of earning a bowl bid against their rival. And, putting Alabama at 8-4 in the season, which I'm not sure many people thought that was going to happen going into year one under Kalen DeBoer. So there's just so much to look forward to in the matchup. What are we going to see from Jalen Milroe? What are we going to see from this Alabama defense? And what does the mindset of this Alabama team look like going into the Iron Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, with the defense, it's going to look different. Obviously, with Deontay Lawson being out, what we saw was Jahad Campbell play, if I'm not mistaken, a season low 2 snaps as an edge rusher. Now, granted, Lawson played a pretty good chunk of that game. I mean, obviously, it wasn't a majority or anything like that, but he saw probably about 25% of the snaps, 30% of the snaps, somewhere in there. And Jahad wasn't really playing a whole lot of edge in those situations. Now, granted, what they typically like to do is Jahad Campbell's going to make the move or slide out to more of a wolf role, be more of a pass rusher, an edge rusher, and then they get Justin Jefferson onto the field because he's a plus cover guy in a lot of obvious, passing situations. And the fact they didn't put Oklahoma in hardly any obvious passing situations, if any, you really didn't see too many opportunities for that. So I'm sure that contributes. But it's logical to think that, Justin Jefferson is now going to be thrust into a full-time every down role. I'm encouraged by what I've seen from him. I think in some ways he could be like a late season breakout guy. Everybody knows what he's capable of. And I'm sure there will be some situations where offenses are able to take advantage of his lack of size or whatever. But I just think that he's going to be one of those players that ends up playing really good football in place of Deontay Lawson. But with him being thrust into a full-time every down role, if you're going to move Jahad Campbell around, you never have one linebacker on the field, like one off-ball guy. This is a 4-2-5 defense, or it's a, if you want to call it a 3-3-5 and how it operates, sometimes that's fine. But that's two off-ball linebackers pretty much in every situation. And so, what can you do, or what will Alabama do with a Jahad Campbell as far as what they, will it be a full-time off-ball role now? You still lost Q Robinson. You still lost Keanu Coote. Yanze Pierre was banged up this past week against Oklahoma, so he didn't see any snaps. It's gotten to a point where even Jamarian Latham, who's 6'3", 280 pounds, he's gone from being one of the two main bandits to playing some Wolf, and he was even lined up, as like a shallow off-ball linebacker when they went with that 3-3-5 look against Oklahoma. He did, okay. I mean, about as good as you could ask for a guy like that, but it's not what he does naturally.
Right.
He was a guy that last year, the last couple of years, he was an interior defensive lineman in a lot of obvious passing situations. He was even lined up as a zero technique nose, if that tells you anything. So he's gone from that to playing pretty much exclusively out on the edge as a bandit in this new defense. And now he's even playing that versatile role where he's having to play off the ball some at Wolf. That's where Alabama's at that Wolf position. So will we continue to see Jamarian Latham? I would assume that you will. Maybe even more so now, because you can't give some of those snaps, or as many of those snaps, to a guy like Jahad Campbell as you did before. And I think that kind of completely changes the dynamic of this defense. I don't think people realize. I mean, at this point, with Yanze Pierre being banged up and not being able to go, where he ended up not going because he was, I think, a little bit banged up, you were down at the Wolf position to a redshirt freshman in Quay Russaw and two true freshmen. And so, I mean, that's where think about how much depth we talked about that position having coming into the season. I don't think people realize just how much, the injuries, not only to the Wolves or the absence of Wolves for one reason or another, and then on top of that, the injury to Deontay Lawson, how much that's really affected things.
Oh, it's changed the Alabama defense from a personnel standpoint, and the injury to Quindarius Robinson is huge. That has been significant, and I don't want to downplay the injury to Lawson, but I feel like from a personnel standpoint, the loss of Robinson was probably more impactful, because you still have a guy like Justin Jefferson who was playing a lot of football, getting a lot of experience. I think you're comfortable, if you're Kane Womack, with Justin Jefferson being on the field for a lot of snaps. But when Q-Rob went out, it really just changed everything, because now you're having to move Jahad around more than what you probably wanted to. But now with Lawson hurt, you can't move him around as much as you want to now. So the loss of Quindarius, plus he was your best edge rusher as well. So Alabama lost a lot when Quindarius Robinson went out with his season-ending injury. So the injuries, while there hasn't just been a ton for Alabama, they've all been significant and they've all been long-term, which is really – this is the time of year when that type of stuff catches up with you, when everybody's playing banged up, everybody's, playing at 75, 80%. And then you got some key members of that team, that defense, out for the season. That's when you start to see things show up, like what happened in Norman last week. And, but you have a week to get ready for Auburn. You're fighting for a playoff spot. I mean, I know it's slim chances, but you're still fighting for that chance. If you don't win, you don't have any chance. But if you win, you give yourself a chance. So you have to be ready to play. Whether, hopefully Yanze Pierre is a little more healthy this week and he can play a little bit. I'm not sure what the staff, how much they plan to play him, but I imagine Alabama's going to try to be a little more physical. So I do think we'll see a lot of Jamarian Latham like we saw last week, just from a physicality standpoint. What does Quay Russaw look like? I thought he kind of got out of position a lot last week against Oklahoma and allowed some Oklahoma to get to the edge a little more than what they should have. So, but he's a young player. I mean, you're going to see those type of mistakes happen when you're having to play as many young guys in those positions as Alabama's defense is having to make. So the injuries have hurt Alabama. I don't think I agree with you. I don't think as fans that has been discussed enough. The impact that the injury of Quindarius Robinson has had, and then obviously with Keanu Coote leaving and entering the transfer portal, that just kind of compounded it, because he was the guy with the next most experience in that position group. So just unfortunate, but injuries are part of football and you got to be ready to play. So hopefully the Alabama front seven is ready to play this week with some new faces, with Lawson out, with Quindarius Robinson out. Can Alabama make the plays in the front seven? Because I think that's where the game's going to be won on Saturday, because you can't – Alabama's going to have to – they're going to take chances, obviously, in this game, because that's what Kane Womack does. But Alabama has to have success against the run when they're light in the box. They can't allow Auburn to dictate the running game in this game, because if you allow many one-on-one matchups with Cam Coleman and those talented receivers, they're going to make plays. So you have to be able to limit what Hunter and Peyton Thorne do in the run game, especially early on, because that's gonna really impact how this game is played.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Like one of the big issues with the Oklahoma game is Alabama clearly had a plan to, attack as far as the corners. They were sending corner blitzes a lot. They were bringing the Husky quite a bit as well, and just trying to pressure from depth like that. It really affected things. Oklahoma, with what their game plan was, the corner had a really hard time getting down there and being able to get involved. When it was a zone read, you hand it to the running back, and he's kind of doing a lot of right off tackle stuff. Really, just the entire. I feel like the game plan put Alabama's defense. It really strained Alabama's own defense in a lot of ways. And you would think, well, I mean, if they're not throwing the football a ton, then you doing things like sending corner blitzes and stuff shouldn't impact you as much. But what was happening is a running back would be going out into the flats, or a tight end, but it was the couple of times I'm thinking of, it was a running back that was attacking the flats. The corner's coming on a blitz, so Deontay Lawson on one particular occasion, and then the other was Justin Jefferson. They're having to keep in mind that they're going to have back in the flats. They got to get out there. Normally it would be the corner, depending on the coverage, but in a lot of situations there's going to be somebody else to account for that. So when you're bringing the corner, by the time he's getting there to get involved in against the run, Deontay Lawson wants to make sure that it's not an RPO. The quarterback doesn't pull it and get it out there into the flat, so he's having to get over the top. It's creating a crease for the running back to hit where the corner doesn't have time to get down. The running back's taking himself out of the play, and you saw Oklahoma do that on multiple occasions. So it's just Alabama's game plan there. I think they thought Oklahoma was going to have a completely different game plan, which is more understandable. Like, this was kind of out in left field, but it's also like a little bit of anticipating, right? I mean, when you're down 5 receivers, it's like, what are they going to try to do against Alabama? They're at home, so they can do a lot, more. They're going to have the crowd at their back. They don't have to worry about the communication standpoint. They had a couple of weeks to prepare. I feel like that was really where Alabama's downfall was. Did I see that coming? Either? No, but at the same time, I really didn't. I'm not a coach really diving in trying to anticipate, what are they going to do that's different? You knew they were going to give you something different. And you knew that they had seen what Vanderbilt had done and, South Carolina and a couple of other teams where they had implemented some things and really caused Alabama's defense strain. And so that's, that is something that I'm concerned about, because one thing about it, Auburn's playing pretty good defense right now, for the most part. Granted, I mean, they gave up a lot of yards and, some touchdowns and points to Texas A&M. That game obviously went to 4 overtimes. That helps too. But, one thing, they're going to play good defense. Defense typically travels. Their offense, if you're not able to get this stuff fixed, they'll get to dictate the entire game. Play defense, keep your offense off the field, and control the football. And if they're able to have their way like Vanderbilt did, or, how Oklahoma was able to do, even more so, in my opinion, in some ways this past weekend, they'll really be able to shorten the game. They'll be able to control clock. And if it's ending in touchdowns and really any scores, but mostly touchdowns, I mean, you can find yourself in really big trouble if you're Alabama.
Yeah, and let's not forget, we've kind of went in on the Alabama defense from what happened last week, but let's not forget that Jalen Milroe gifted the Oklahoma offense 2 touchdowns basically. One was a pick six, the other one was basically returned for a touchdown. I mean, the offense is set up right there at the goal line. So I just they scored 24 and they were gifted 14. So while the defense did give up a lot of yards, I thought there was a lot of good moments where they got to the red zone, they straightened some things up and was able to force some field goals for the Oklahoma offense. So I do want to give the defense credit for that, and obviously, and I don't want to take away from what Oklahoma did as well. They had 2 weeks to prepare. They were off the week before Alabama, and they had a masterful game plan, and they executed it. And Alabama was not able to counter that with anything that worked to any kind of consistency. So credit to Oklahoma for their game plan and their execution, but also let's not forget that Alabama did gift Oklahoma 2 touchdowns in that game.
100%.
So
And I do want to also point out that there's a flip side to that. But at the same time, I agree with you overall. You had the missed field goal. That certainly helps. And you also had the red area turnover early in the game by Oklahoma that Alabama allowed them to drive the length of the field. But that kind of speaks to Kane Wommack's defense, right? We talk a lot, bend but don't break, but then also their ability to force turnovers. It doesn't matter if you give up 80 yards on that drive, as long as it doesn't result in any points. That's kind of how his defense is built in certain moments. So yeah, while I'll say I feel like Oklahoma left points on the field, I also will say, you got to give Alabama credit because they were able to force, you force the field goal situation where he misses it and you force the turnover. There's some give and take there. I would agree with you overall. The defense didn't play great by any means, but it was also, you cannot forget that a majority of Oklahoma's points came off of poor offensive performance.
Right. And so I just feel like it's easy to beat up on the defense especially when the team runs the ball on you. It's so hard to look past that, especially, a lot of Alabama fans grew up watching defenses suffocating opposing running games. I mean, you think about what they did to Leonard Fournette. I mean, he's still getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage. It's easy for fans to kind of look past some of the other critical factors that played into why a game, turned out a certain way. So I didn't want that to go unsaid. But in speaking of the offense, you're not going to win many football games throwing the football to the other team and allowing them to either have a pick six or run the ball inside the red zone. And you're just not going to win a lot of football games that way. So protecting the football, playing good, sound, fundamental defense, executing your game plan and what you want to do. I mean, I know that sounds so cliche, but that's what wins you football games. And Alabama did not do that last week at Oklahoma at all. And so I think if Alabama just plays like Alabama, that they have a good shot of beating Auburn on Saturday at home. And look, I hope this team shows up with the right mindset. And I never jump on the bandwagon of fans saying that players are not playing hard or, they didn't practice hard the week before. Nobody wants to win games more than the players do. I promise you that. Those coaches and players put more into that than any fan possibly could. So I don't like when that type of mindset comes from the fans. Those players want it. But you got to think the other teams want it too. So you got to want it more. And so I hope the team was able to put the work in this week, correct the things. Everything this team does is correctable. Nothing is there's no glaring weakness in this team that can't be fixed, in my opinion. So we saw Milroe's capable of being a good football player. Is he an elite quarterback in terms of throwing the football, making decisions? No, but he is a elite athlete in a good quarterback. Alabama can win plenty of football games and go where they want to go with Jalen Milroe, but he has to play within the offense and not make mistakes. And Alabama has to be willing to run the football with Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. And I know Justice Haynes was a little banged up from kind of the remarks that Coach DeBoer made, but I thought they got away from that. And I just want to see more effort in running the football with those two running backs because they're too talented not to get the ball to.
Yeah, I mean, you can, and that's exactly right. They had success. I went back and looked. I want to say 8 of their 15 runs went for 4 yards or more. I think 3 others went for 3 yards, which means 11. I mean, 3 yards isn't terrible. It's not great, but if you can, if you get 3 yards on back-to-back carries, it's a 3rd and 4 situation. That's more of a 3rd and medium, but it's a 3rd and a shorter medium. Like especially if you have Jalen Milroe's legs and stuff. They're over here running, QB counter on a 3rd.
The whole playbook is open. The whole playbook is open on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And so, that's 11 of the 15 carries being 3 yards or more. I do really feel like that they could have leaned on those 2 guys. Now, granted, like you said, we don't know the health or the status of Justice Haynes. Obviously, he only got 3 carries for 18 yards, and he only played 8 snaps in the game. And you saw Richard Young fairly early, and that was telling to me. I almost guarantee he was not 100%, or something is going on with him. But yeah, they need to lean on those guys. Jalen Milroe, for the most part, I mean, he can play good football. He's limited. You're limited in what you can call as an offense coordinator with him in the game. That's bottom line. That's not me
Yep.
knocking him.
It's facts.
There's certain things that he doesn't do well. There's certain elements, like as far as the RPO, quick slant over the middle of the field, you're never really going to get that from Jalen Milroe much. As far as the zone reads and all those things, sometimes he's not going to read things correctly. I don't know if it's just, I think when he's unsure of himself, when he's going to make that read and he's reading the defender, he's going to trust him. If he doesn't know, he would 10 to 1 rather pull it himself, trust himself to try to get some yardage or to take that hit if he's wrong, rather than giving it to the running back. And so I think a lot of times he's unsure because he makes a lot of wrong reads. I mean, he makes some good reads, or I wouldn't say good, but he makes the correct read sometimes, but it's a 50-50 chance. And so I think the percent chance that he guesses or he gets it right would tell me it's higher than 50%, but it's high. Also, the percentage where it doesn't work out is high enough where you're like, I feel like we're just on the good side of guessing in a lot of these situations. And so that's something that you got to plan around. But I think Alabama's offense, it has the ability, all the trash talking that Auburn has done. We'll see how that comes into play here. I don't know how much that makes a difference on game day, but at least being motivated and trying to get things right and wanting to be as prepared as possible, I think that's something that really factors in. And it's also one thing we've noticed about Jalen Milroe. When everybody's doubting him, he tends to come through and play pretty well. When everybody's singing his praises, post Georgia, and really in a lot of ways, we were still really defending him after the Vanderbilt game because the offense did what it did in limited minutes. And, he made some pretty good plays, but also, people were starting to question him a little bit with the turnovers. But then against South Carolina, against Tennessee, he's played some poor football, but then we start doubting him. And all of a sudden he starts figuring things out against Mercer, does phenomenal against LSU, does all that stuff. And then you start singing his praises again, and then you get what you got against Oklahoma on the road. So the fact that this is in Bryant-Denny is also very helpful. Go ahead, Stacey.
I was just going to say this is a huge game for Jalen Milroe when you think about it, because there's a possibility if this team doesn't make a playoff that it could be his last game. I mean, that's not out of the question. So this is a big moment for Jalen Milroe. And look, I love the kid. Jalen Milroe is a great person. I want him to succeed because obviously I want Alabama to succeed, but he's got to get out of his head. And it all goes back to, you talked about when everybody's singing his praises, he starts turning the football over. When everybody starts doubting him, he looks like Lamar Jackson. So it's too much Jekyll and Hyde with Jalen Milroe, which has kind of been the story for this entire team this season. But I do think we're going to get a better version of Jalen Milroe tomorrow than what we got in Norman, because one, it's at home. There's the potential of it being his last game, and I think he is going to have something to prove. But I go back to, you look at, just go look at his track record as the Alabama quarterback. When he starts off good in a game, he usually plays good for the entire game. But if he ever starts off sluggish, and it wasn't even him to start the game last week, it was drop passes from the receivers that really hurt the team early on. But he just can't ever seem to recover from that. So if Milroe can just kind of stay out of his own head in a way and just play football, take what the defense gives him, then he's going to have success, and the Alabama offense is going to have success. And I certainly believe they can make plays against the Auburn defense. Even though they are a pretty solid defense, I think there are plays to be made against them. And I think Jalen Milroe has the ability to make those plays.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the only example that would really go against that, in my opinion, because I 100% agree with you, and it's a high enough percentage where that's a safe comment to make. The only time really where I've seen him bounce back, and now granted, there were games last year, obviously really rough first half against Ole Miss. Comes out there, he has the explosive momentum changing play to Jalen Hill. That really got him going. Tennessee was a very similar situation. Started the second half, explosive play, really got him and his confidence going. But this year, you are 100% correct. Outside of the Missouri game, a lot of the problems continued to persist in the first half. And then late in the first half, you started seeing, a little bit there. But we also were looking at a Milroe where it's like maybe he was overcoming some sort of injury, even though that's been, debated to death. It's been beaten to death. So we're not going to dive into that. But yeah, I agree with you. They kind of live and die by Milroe.
Yeah.
To me, do in some ways do kind of what Auburn's done, where
Yeah.
Hugh Freeze is a big RPO guy. And he really wants to do that. I mean, I would say that's like 85% of their offense. It seems like, but just it seems like recently he's said, okay, I really want to do it, but with this offense, with this personnel, let me start taking a little bit of the decisions out of some of these things. And it is what it is. Your offensive line knows exactly where the football is supposed to be going on any particular play. The running back knows I'm 100% getting this football. It's a different mindset. Jalen Milroe understands I'm not getting the football here. There's nothing to read because you got to think from his perspective, could it be affecting his confidence? If he's doing a bunch of read stuff and he understands that he's making the wrong decisions, could that affect his psyche as far as, man, damn, I messed that up. Damn, I messed that one up. And then just it starts affecting the throwing and all that stuff. Take it out of his hands. Be more definitive in what you're, doing on a play in, play out basis. Mix some of that in, of course, but just not as much and see if it helps your offense in the same way, in my opinion, that's really helped Auburn. So it's going to be a good game. Obviously, the rivalry factor plays a part. Auburn's fighting for a bowl game. They got stuff to play for. A lot of it goes way beyond what happens on the field, though. There's so much momentum that Auburn has right now with the way, if you can beat Texas A&M, upset them, you can go on the road and upset Alabama in year 2 for Hugh Freeze, and he almost got Nick Saban last year. I mean, it could have been if he wins this game, it could have been very possible. They could have been 2-0 against Alabama since getting to Auburn. They got a great recruiting class. They're really picking up steam and momentum. They would have all of the momentum into the world. Not saying that them losing this game is going to kill all of that momentum, but I think that Kalen DeBoer getting a win year 1 against Auburn, I think would be absolutely huge. And then you've got signing day coming up right after that in just a few days, which we'll be covering a ton next week, by the way. So there's a lot riding on what's going on. Stacey, I appreciate you. You got anything else to add before we hop out of here?
No, I hope Alabama takes a little off Milroe, because it's easy to blame the quarterback, but when you're not doing things around him well either, it compounds that. And look, Alabama's got to lean on their running backs. They got too much talent in that running back room to not lean on them a little bit more. So hopefully we'll see that tomorrow, and hopefully we'll see that defense kind of flying around and making plays and putting the game on Peyton Thorne's shoulders. And look, if they beat you with those young, talented receivers, they do it, but you can't allow Jarquez Hunter to run for 150 yards against you, because that's just that's a recipe for disaster if you're Alabama.
Vanderbilt and a lot of, from a yards per carry standpoint, didn't have a ton of success necessarily, but it did feel like they had complete control of that game. When they needed yardage on the ground, they got it. But you look at Tennessee, you look at South Carolina to an extent, you look at obviously with Oklahoma, a lot of the games they've struggled in have been, teams have found success on the ground against them. You've got to slow. That's what Auburn wants to do. Well, I wouldn't say it's what they want to do. I feel like they've underutilized Jarquez Hunter at various points of the season for chunk periods of time, but it really feels like they've, had a renewed sense of committing to him. And so that's what they want to do right now. You've got to stop that primarily. I completely agree with you. A lot of great games happening, both today's Friday. So happening today, happening tomorrow, a lot of outs for Alabama as far as needing to get a couple of things done. But I want to say, like I said, there's like 6, 7, or 8 possibilities. So definitely, as an Alabama fan, you need to be paying attention to that. But also, get on over to mybookie.ag, use the promo code next round. Make it if you know what you're picking. I will say this: not only would you potentially be betting on something that can help Alabama, but putting a little money in your pocket while you do it would make it all the sweeter, right? So get on over there, mybookie.ag, and use the promo code next round. They'd have a great deal going on as far as matching 300% your deposit bonus and 50 free spins on the casino side. I've already, speaking candidly, taken advantage of that. It is very nice. And I would encourage others to do that as well, because that helps us. I mean, they're one of the main ones that's keeping us on the air and allowing us to do this each and every week. We appreciate them so much. And Stacey, I appreciate you. We will do this again sometime early next week, I would assume. And we'll be hopefully talking about Alabama getting a nice win in the Iron Bowl. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for everybody listening, and we will talk to you guys soon.